Callum Dre grabbed the woman's wrist, hard instinct before thought, and spun her around before he even opened his eyes all the way. His body reacted the way 11 years of war had trained it to. Threat first, questions later. But the face staring back at him wasn't an enemy. It was her, his neighbor standing in his bedroom wearing his shirt, her dark hair still damp, her eyes wide calm and completely unafraid of the 6'2" man gripping her arm like she was about to disappear. And the worst part, he had absolutely no memory of how she got there. Who are you to him? Drop your city in the comments. I want to see how far this story travels. Subscribe so you never miss what happens next. The first thing Callum felt was pain. Not the sharp surgical kind he'd learned to catalog and file away during deployments. This was the low grinding pressure behind both eyes that came from one thing, and one thing only: too much whiskey and not enough sleep. He lay still for a moment, the way he always did when waking up somewhere unfamiliar. Assess. Orient. Don't move until you know where you are. Except he was in his own bedroom. He knew that from the creak in the ceiling above the window, the one he'd been meaning to fix for 6 months. He knew it from the weight of his own mattress and the specific gray light that came through his curtains every single morning in this apartment. He was home. So why did everything feel wrong? He rolled over and his arm landed on something warm. He was on his feet before his brain caught up with his body. Whoa, hey! His hand shot out, grabbed a wrist, pulled, and then he was face to face with Sable Ainsworth. She didn't scream. She didn't flinch. She just looked at him completely steady, like she'd been expecting this exact reaction. Like she'd been waiting for the moment the sleeping soldier finally woke up. "Good morning," she said. Callum released her wrist, took one step back, then another. His back hit the dresser, and he didn't move again, just stood there staring at her, his chest heaving, his mind running a hard sprint through total darkness. She was wearing his shirt, his old Navy PT shirt. Gray faded, the letters cracked across the chest, and it fell to mid-thigh on her because she was shorter than him by almost a foot. Her dark hair was loose, and still had that faint curl from rain-dried humidity. She was barefoot on his hardwood floor, and she was watching him the way you watch something fragile that doesn't know it's about to break. "You okay?" she asked. "No," Callum said honestly. "What are you doing in my apartment? You invited me." "I what?" "Last night." She crossed her arms, not defensive, just settled. "The bar on Delaney Street. You were there. I was there. We talked. You offered to walk me to my car. It started raining." She tilted her head slightly. "Do any of those words mean anything to you yet?" He pressed the heels of his hands against his eyes. Fragments. That's all he had. Fragments of a bar stool. A voice, the smell of cigarette smoke and rain on asphalt. "Bits," he said. "I've got bits." "That's a start." He dropped his hands and looked at her again. Properly this time. He'd seen her in the hallway a dozen times, maybe more, in the 18 months since he'd moved into this building. Exchanged the usual neighbor pleasantries. "Hey. Morning. Cold out there." The kind of words that filled space without meaning anything. He knew her name because she'd left a note on his door once apologizing for a package she'd accidentally signed for. Sorry it was already in my hands. Sable 4. B. He'd knocked, returned the box, said thanks. Gone back to 4C, and not thought much more about it. Now she was in his bedroom, in his shirt, and she was looking at him like she was waiting for him to either thank her or throw her out, and she'd prepared herself for both. "Nothing happened," she said. Her voice was flat and clear, the way someone talks when they need to be believed and they know it. "I need you to hear that. Nothing happened between us. You were drunk, not sloppy, not aggressive, just done. You'd hit your wall. I walked you up here because it was either that or leave you sleeping against the door to your building, and I didn't think you'd want your daughter seeing that in the morning." Something in Callum's chest went cold and still. "Ren," he said. "She's not here. You told me last night she was with your sister-in-law until Sunday. I didn't do anything with your kid, I just..." Sable stopped, exhaled through her nose. "I'm not explaining this well." "You're doing fine," he said, and that surprised her. He could see it, a small crack in that steady composure, a brief hesitation like she'd braced for a fight and he'd handed her a white flag instead. She hadn't expected him to say that. Your shirt got soaked in the rain. She continued more carefully now. Mine too. You handed me this one. Insisted actually, you were very firm about it. A small reluctant curve at the corner of her mouth. And then you sat down on the bed to take your boots off and just didn't get back up. You were out within about 90 seconds. I was going to sleep on the couch, but it's not really a couch, Callum finished. He knew. He'd bought it for the look of the thing without actually testing whether a human being could sleep on it. It's more of a very expensive bench. Yes, that. So She paused. I stayed on my side. The whole night. And then I was going to leave before you woke up, but I couldn't find my phone, and I didn't want to just disappear without... She stopped again. I didn't want you to wake up and think that I did something I can't remember. Yeah. The silence between them had weight. Not uncomfortable exactly. More like the silence that follows a confession, the kind where both people are deciding what it means. Callum walked to the window. Not away from her, just he needed somewhere to put his eyes for a second. The street below was early morning quiet. Wet pavement. A woman walking a dog. A delivery truck idling at the corner. I remember more now, he said. Little pieces. You were at the end of the bar. Corner stool. I was trying to read. But you weren't. No, she admitted. I wasn't. You had a glass of red wine and you were turning the pages every few minutes, but you weren't reading. He turned back to look at her. I noticed that before I sat down. She seemed to weigh that for a moment. Then, is that why you sat down? Because I wasn't reading? Partially. He moved toward the door of the bedroom, nodding for her to follow. You want coffee? A beat. Sure. The kitchen was small. Everything about Callum's apartment was functional rather than comfortable. The furniture chosen for durability, the shelves holding only what was used. But the coffee maker was a good one. That was one indulgence he'd allowed himself. After years of drinking whatever sludge the galley offered, he'd decided that at minimum, his mornings would start with something decent. He started the pot without speaking. Sable sat down at the kitchen table without being invited, but without being presumptuous either. She sat the way people sit when they're comfortable being somewhere, but aware they're still a guest. You have a daughter's drawings on the fridge, she said. He glanced over his shoulder. The refrigerator door was covered in them crayon drawings, watercolor blobs, paper cutouts, carefully taped up by small hands. Wren had been making art since she could hold a marker, and Callum kept every single one. Wren, he said. She's 6. What's she like? He turned back to the coffee maker. The question landed differently than he expected. People asked about Wren all the time. His co-workers, his sister-in-law, his neighbors who'd seen him in the hallway with a small girl who had her mother's eyes. And he always gave the same answers. She's great. She's a handful. She's the best thing in my life. True, all of it. But surface level. The script. Chaotic, he said instead. She talks constantly. She has opinions about everything. Her socks have to match her mood, not just match each other, but match her mood, which is a concept I didn't even understand until she explained it to me. He shook his head. She told me last week that blue socks are for days when you feel like the sky, and green ones are for when you feel like growing. I said, Wren, you're 6, and she said, Dad, socks matter. Sable laughed. Not a polite laugh. An actual one, real and sudden, like she hadn't expected it to arrive. Callum poured 2 cups and brought them to the table. He sat across from her. The table was small. Everything was small, and there wasn't far between them. Last night, he started. I said something about Mara. It wasn't a question. He knew he had. He could feel the residue of it, that particular emotional hangover that came not from drinking, but from saying too much, from letting someone in past the checkpoint. You did, Sable said. She wrapped both hands around her cup and looked at him steadily. You don't have to revisit it if you don't want to. I want to know what I said, You talked about how she died, briefly, and then you talked about how you found out that you were deployed, that someone had to call you. She paused. And you said the hardest part wasn't the grief. It was coming home to a daughter who was too young to understand where her mom went and having to figure out how to explain something you didn't fully understand yourself. Callum was quiet. I shouldn't have said that to a stranger, he said. I'm not really a stranger. She said it simply without any particular weight. I've lived 30 feet from you for a year and a half. I've heard you reading to your daughter through the wall at night. I've left you quiet in the elevator 100 times because you looked like you needed the quiet. She took a sip of coffee. We just never actually spoke. And last night we did. And last night we did. He turned his cup in his hands. It was a habit, something to do when he was thinking, when the words were coming together slowly, and he didn't want to say the wrong thing. Why were you at that bar? He asked. She looked at the table, brief but enough. I needed to be somewhere that wasn't here, she said. He didn't push. He'd been in enough rooms with enough people who were carrying things they weren't ready to name. You didn't demand the story. You made space for it. Sometimes that was all you could do. Fair enough, he said. She glanced up. Again that small surprise, like she kept expecting him to take, and he kept not taking. You're different than I thought you were, she said. What did you think I was? She considered it honestly. Closed off, the kind of person who's fine but not actually fine, functional and alone. Callum looked at her. That's pretty accurate, though. I know, she said, but it's not all you are. The coffee maker beeped once, done brewing. A bird somewhere below the window started up 3 sharp notes repeated. The apartment held the particular stillness of a Saturday morning, unhurried without demand. You want eggs, Callum said. Sable blinked. Then she smiled full, this time both sides of her face in it. Yeah, she said. I want eggs. He cooked without ceremony. Scrambled, because that's what he made every morning, and he was better at it than he was at anything else in the domestic category. He pulled bread from the cabinet, found butter that wasn't completely hardened, located the salt shaker that Wren had hidden behind the cereal box, for reasons that remained unexplained. She hides things, he said, setting the shaker on the counter. Wren, she goes through phases. Last month it was the TV remote. Month before that it was one of my boots, just the left one, never the right, for 3 weeks straight. I wore mismatched ones to work twice before I found it in the laundry hamper. One boot. One boot. He cracked 4 eggs into the pan. She said she was keeping it safe for me. I said from what, and she said from getting lonely. Sable was quiet for a moment. That's not chaotic, she said. That's extraordinary. Callum glanced back at her. She was looking at him with something in her expression he couldn't immediately name, not pity, and not the gentle performance of empathy. Something older and quieter than either of those things. She's trying to take care of you, Sable said. He turned back to the pan. Yeah, he said low. She is. He plated the eggs, brought them to the table. They ate without the pressure of filling every second with sound, another thing that surprised him. Most people couldn't do that. Most people got nervous in the silence and threw words at it. Sable just stayed in it, comfortable, present. Halfway through the meal she said, I lost someone too. He looked up. Not the same. It wasn't a marriage. It was... She stopped, started again. It was someone I thought I was going to build a life with, and then one day I woke up and the whole future I'd imagined was just not there anymore. And I couldn't figure out if I was grieving the person or the version of myself who believed in it. Callum set his fork down. How long ago? 8 months. That's still recent. Yeah, she said. It is. He thought about the 100 times he'd passed her in the hallway and seen nothing. How she'd always been contained, composed, a face he recognized without knowing. And underneath that, she'd been carrying 8 months of something unnamed and heavy. Is that why you were at the bar? He asked. Last night. It was the anniversary, she said, of the day I found out. I didn't want to spend it alone in my apartment, but I didn't want to be around people who knew me either. She looked at him directly. A bar full of strangers felt safer. Until one of the strangers started talking to you. Until one of the strangers started talking to me. She picked up her fork again. You're not what I would have picked, just so you know. He almost smiled. I wasn't in a picking kind of mood either. And yet, he agreed. When they'd finished eating, Sable helped clear the plates, not in a performed way, just automatic natural, the kind of movement that meant she was actually comfortable, rather than trying to signal that she was. Callum washed, she dried, and the silence between them was easy in a way that almost nothing had been easy for him in years. She found her phone behind the cushion of the not-quite couch. Her own clothes were dry enough by then, folded on the bathroom counter where Callum had apparently put them sometime the night before, though he still had no clear memory of doing it. He handed her his shirt back. She changed in the bathroom and came out looking like herself again. Dark jeans, gray top, the kind of woman who didn't need much to look like she was somewhere she was supposed to be. At the door, she stopped. They stood there a moment, not awkwardly, but with the weight of two people who had stepped across some line in the night and were now standing on the other side of it looking back. Thank you, Callum said, for all of it. For not just leaving me in front of the building. You would have survived. Probably. But still. She looked at him one more time, that clear, steady gaze. And then she nodded once, like something had been decided or confirmed. Get some water, she said, and something with electrolytes. Yes, ma'am. The corner of her mouth twitched. Then she stepped into the hallway, and Callum stood in the doorway and watched her walk the 30 feet to 4B. She didn't look back. Her door opened, and then it closed, and then the hallway was empty. Callum leaned against the frame of his own door. The apartment behind him was quiet the way it always was on the weekends when Ren was away, a silence that used to feel like space to breathe, and lately had started to feel more like an absence. Today it felt different. He wasn't sure what to call that yet. He was standing there still working on it when he heard it faint through the wall from the apartment 30 feet and one door away. Music. Low and unhurried, an old song he half recognized, something slow with a piano underneath it. He stood there a few seconds longer than he needed to. Then he went inside, found a glass, filled it with water, and started drinking. The water helped. So did the 2 ibuprofen he found in the cabinet above the sink, the ones he'd bought 3 months ago for a pulled muscle and forgotten about. He took them standing at the counter, swallowed them dry out of habit, and then drank the rest of the glass slowly. The music through the wall had stopped. He didn't know when exactly. Somewhere between the second glass of water and the moment he sat down on the couch, the not really a couch, and stared at the ceiling long enough for the light in the room to shift. Outside, the street was waking up. He could hear it in layers, the garbage truck 2 blocks over, someone's kid on a bicycle. The distant pulse of a city that didn't slow down for anyone's headache. He thought about what Sable had said. You're not what I would have picked. And the way she'd said it, not cruel, not even sharp. Just honest. The way someone talks when they've stopped performing and started meaning it. He'd been on the receiving end of a lot of honesty over the years, most of it brutal. Mission debrief honesty. Hospital honesty. The specific terrible honesty of a chaplain at a door. Hers had been different. Hers had been the kind that didn't ask anything of him in return. He sat with that for a while. Then his phone buzzed. He grabbed it off the coffee table, expecting his sister-in-law, maybe a check-in about Ren. Instead, it was Marcus, his co-worker, one of the guys from last night, and the message was short. You alive? You disappeared around 11. Leaving with the woman from the corner was a power move, by the way. Callum stared at the screen. He typed back, nothing happened. 3 dots appeared immediately. Then, sure. He put the phone face down on the cushion. That was the thing about the guys he worked with. They were sharp enough to see everything, and just imprecise enough to misread it. Marcus wasn't wrong that Callum had left with Sable. He wasn't wrong that it looked like something. He was just wrong about what that something was. Callum wasn't sure he could have explained it, even if he'd wanted to. He didn't have the language for it yet. All he had was the fact that for approximately 3 hours last night, from the moment he sat down on the bar stool beside a woman who wasn't reading her book, to the moment sleep took him mid-sentence on his own mattress, he had not thought about being tired. Not the body tired. The other kind. He'd been carrying that other kind for so long, he'd stopped noticing its weight. You adjusted. You compensated. You got good at moving through the world with something heavy strapped to your back, until the weight became so familiar you mistook it for your own body. Last night for 3 hours he'd set it down. He didn't know what to do with that. So he did what he always did when he didn't know what to do with something he moved. He showered, changed, and made a list in his head of the things that needed doing before Ren came home Sunday. Groceries. Laundry. Her dinosaur sheets were still in the dryer from Thursday. The loose cabinet handle in the bathroom he'd been taping shut with electrical tape for 2 weeks because he hadn't gotten around to buying the right screws. He was pulling the dinosaur sheets out of the dryer, still warm, pressing them into a rough fold the way Ren had taught him. Dad, the corners go inside, not outside. You always do it wrong. When he heard a knock at the door, he almost didn't answer it. He wasn't expecting anyone, and the headache was still a low hum behind his eyes, and he was not in a state to perform functional normalcy for anyone who required it. But he went anyway. Sable was standing in the hallway. She was holding a small paper bag in one hand and a cup of coffee that wasn't his. The logo on the sleeve was from the place around the corner, the good one, and she looked at him the way someone looks when they've committed to a thing and won't back down from it now. "I brought breakfast," she said. He blinked. "We already had breakfast." "That was eggs. This is breakfast." She held up the bag. "There's a difference." He looked at her for a long moment. She didn't shift, didn't fill the silence with explanation. Just waited. He stepped back and opened the door wider. She came in like she'd done it before, which she had, and set the bag on the kitchen table. Inside were 2 pastries from the bakery, 2 blocks over, the kind with almond paste in the center, that cost more than pastries had any right to cost and were absolutely worth it. She set the coffee beside them. "I didn't know how you took it," she said, "so I got it black. I figured you for black." "You figured right." She sat down. He sat across from her. They ate without preamble, and Callum noticed again that she wasn't someone who needed to fill every second with noise. He'd grown up in a house where silence meant something was wrong, where his mother would paper over every quiet moment with television or radio or conversation that didn't go anywhere. He'd learned to mistrust quiet as a kid, and then relearned it in the field, learned that silence could be tactical, could be cover, could be the thing that kept you alive. He hadn't learned yet that it could also just be comfortable. "Can I ask you something?" he said. "You're going to anyway. Last night, you said you'd been 8 months trying to figure out if you were grieving the person or the version of yourself who believed in it." He picked at the edge of his pastry. "Have you figured it out?" Sable looked at the table. "Not a way, just down the way someone does when they're actually thinking rather than stalling. Mostly the version of myself," she said. "The person." She paused. "He wasn't who I thought he was. I think I knew that for a while before it ended. And that's the part that's hard to sit with. That I kept building the story even when parts of it didn't add up. That I wanted the version I'd made up more than I wanted the truth." "That's not weakness," Callum said. She looked up. "That's just how people work," he said. "We commit to the version we can stand to live with. Is that what you did with Mara?" He didn't flinch. The name landed the way it always did, like a stone dropping into water, the ripple going out before he could stop it. But he didn't look away. "No," he said. "With Mara, I had the real version. That's what made it harder." She held his gaze. "Tell me something real about her." Most people didn't ask that. Most people asked what happened, how she died, how long ago, how he was managing. The logistics of loss. Sable was asking for the actual person, and something in his chest cracked open a millimeter. "She burned everything she cooked," he said. "Not because she was a bad cook, she just got distracted. Every single time. She'd start making dinner, and then she'd pick up a book or start a crossword or call her sister, and I'd walk into the kitchen and something would be on fire." He stopped, surprised himself with a sound that was almost a laugh. "I installed a better smoke detector because of her, twice, in 2 different apartments." Did she care? That she set the smoke detector off? Not even a little. She'd just open the windows and say the pasta needed character anyway. Sable smiled, a real one, quiet and genuine. She sounds wonderful, she said. She was impossible, Callum said. She was... He stopped, started again. She was the kind of person who made you feel like you were always running slightly behind and you didn't mind because at least it meant you were following her somewhere. The kitchen was quiet. The coffee was good. The almond pastry was everything it had promised to be. Wren has her eyes, he said after a while, and her laugh. That specific laugh high at the start, then it goes low, like she can't decide how funny something is. He shook his head. She's 6 years old, and she's already got that laugh, and it stops me every time. Every single time. Sable didn't say anything. She didn't say I'm sorry, or that must be hard, or any of the things people said when they didn't have better words. She just listened, and the listening had texture to it. She was actually receiving what he was saying, not just waiting for her turn. What does Wren know, she asked, about her mom? Everything I can give her that's age-appropriate, which right now is her mom loved her very much. Her mom was brave and kind and funny, and her mom isn't here anymore, but she's still close. He exhaled. I made a photo book, big one, her whole life, all the pictures I had. I put it on Wren's shelf where she can reach it herself. She looks at it sometimes when she thinks I don't notice. Does she say anything when she looks at it? Sometimes she asks me questions. Did Mama like dinosaurs? Did Mama like purple or blue? Did Mama think I was funny? He looked at the window. And I answer them. Every one. Because she deserves to know. Yes? Sable said quietly. She does. He looked back at her. There was something in Sable's face he hadn't fully seen before. Not this morning. Not in the hallway, all those months. Not even last night. A kind of recognition. Like she was seeing something in him that matched something in herself, and it surprised her. You're good at this, she said. At what? At being honest about the hard things without making it a performance. He snorted. I'm not always. Ask Marcus. I once punched a wall in the parking lot of a TGI Fridays because I didn't have language for what I was feeling, and I needed somewhere to put it. That surprised her into a real laugh, sudden full, the kind that changed her whole face. What were you feeling? I honestly still don't know. That was 2 years ago, and I never did figure it out. He shook his head. The wall survived. My hand did not. Oh my God. In my defense, it was an extremely frustrating week. In your defense, she repeated, still laughing, shaking her head. And then the laughter settled, and she was looking at him again, and the warmth of that moment hung between them, easy and strange and real. I haven't laughed like that in... She started, and then stopped. 8 months, he offered. She looked at him. Something moved across her face. Yeah, she said. About that. He got up, took both cups to the counter, topped off the coffee that remained in the maker. Outside, a siren passed, distant, heading somewhere else, someone else's emergency. He set her cup back in front of her and stayed standing for a moment, his hands on the back of his chair. Why did you come back? He asked. She wrapped both hands around the cup again. That posture, he'd noticed it this morning too, like she gathered herself inward when she was thinking. Because I went back to my apartment, she said, and I sat down and I thought about the conversation we had last night. And then I thought about the conversation we had this morning. And then I thought about... She stopped, started again more carefully. I've been very practiced this past year at being okay, at looking like someone who is fine and managing and moving forward, and I'm good at it. I've gotten really good at it. She looked up at him. But this morning, I didn't have to do that. And when I went back to my apartment, it felt different. It felt louder, Callum said. Her eyes widened slightly. The quiet, he said. It gets loud when you've been somewhere where it wasn't. Yes, she said, soft and certain. Exactly that. He sat back down. They stayed like that for a while, the coffee going slowly cool, the morning assembling itself outside. Tell me something about you, he said. Not about him, not about the last 8 months, something from before. She considered it like it was a real question, like she had to actually search for the answer. I used to sail, she said finally. He raised an eyebrow. He hadn't expected that. With my grandfather. Every summer until I was 17. He had a boat on the Chesapeake, nothing fancy, a 20-foot sloop he'd had since the 70s. It was always half in need of repair, and he refused to buy a new one. A small smile appeared. He said this boat has character, and I said, Grandpa, this boat has a leak, and he said same thing. Callum laughed. Genuine unguarded it came out before he planned it. He sounds like he was something. He was everything, she said. He died when I was 22 and I haven't been on a sailboat since. Why not? She turned the cup slowly. Because it was ours. That specific thing was ours. And I didn't want to do it without him and feel the absence the whole time. Callum was quiet for a moment. I know that feeling. I know you do. They looked at each other. It was a different kind of looking than the morning before, less assessing, more settled, like two people who'd been examining each other for the exits and had both quietly decided to stop. The gym in this building doesn't have a punching bag, he said out of nowhere. She blinked at the change of direction. What? I'm saying I've been using the one at the base, but it's 40 minutes from here. I've been looking into getting one for the apartment, but Ren is convinced it'll come alive and get her. He picked up his cup. The point is, the release valve I normally use isn't always accessible, and sometimes I end up in parking lots. I'm working on that. She stared at him for a second. Then she understood he wasn't just talking about punching bags. I do yoga, she said. When I'm in my head. My neighbor does it too, the woman in 4A. We were going to start doing it together, but then we stopped talking because of a thing with a parking spot, and now it's awkward. The parking spot thing is real. I witnessed 2 men in this building almost come to genuine violence over a parking spot. 3C and the guy in 2B. You know about this. Everyone knows about this. That's been going on for 8 months. She paused. See, now I have a timeline for everything. He smiled. She smiled back. The morning had become something neither of them had planned for, and it sat between them, not as a problem, but as a fact comfortable, unexplained, not needing to be named. His phone buzzed again on the counter. He glanced at it. Marcus again, this time with a row of raised eyebrow emojis and nothing else. He turned it face down without answering. Coworker, Sable asked. One of the ones from last night. He has theories. About you, me, this morning. She tilted her head. What kind of theories? The wrong kind. He looked at her. For what it's worth, I plan on correcting them. You don't have to on my account. I know. I want to on mine. He said it plainly without weight. What happened last night was, he searched for it. It was something I didn't know I needed, and whatever it wasn't that. She held his gaze, and then she nodded slowly. Thank you for that. Thank you for the pastry. That made her smile again, the real one, the one that reached all the way up. She stood picking up the paper bag and folding it neatly, the way people do when they're comfortable enough to clean up after themselves. At the door, she stopped. She turned back. Callum. He looked up. The next time Ren is home, she said carefully, and you need someone to sit with her for an hour, or 2, if you ever need that. She wasn't offering out of pity. He could hear the difference. I'm 30 feet away. He stood at the kitchen table and looked at this woman who had appeared in his bed wearing his shirt, and told him the truth, and brought him almond pastries, and made him laugh in a way he'd forgotten his body knew how to do. I might take you up on that, he said. Good, she said. And then she was gone again, back through the door down the hall, 30 feet and 1 door away. Callum stood in the kitchen. The apartment was quiet, but for the first time in a very long time, the quiet didn't immediately expand to fill every corner of him. It stayed at a reasonable size, manageable, almost like just a room. He picked up his phone. He texted Marcus back. Wrong. But thank you for the concern. Then he went and got the right screws for the bathroom cabinet because Ren was coming home Sunday and he had things to do. Sunday came the way Sundays always did, too fast and slightly sideways, like a car that knew where it was going, but took the corners harder than necessary. Callum had the apartment in order by 10 in the morning. Dinosaur sheets on the bed, bathroom cabinet fixed the specific brand of apple juice Ren would accept in the refrigerator, alongside the specific brand. She would not, because she was 6 and had standards. He'd vacuumed, which he only did before Ren came home, and never in between, because she treated the vacuum cleaner like a natural disaster that needed to be contained, and had once cried for 40 minutes because he'd run it over a small pile of what he'd thought was lint, but had turned out to be, according to Ren, a family of dust people she had named. He didn't vacuum over anything small anymore without checking first. At 11:15, his sister-in-law Diane's car pulled up outside, and Callum was downstairs before she'd even gotten Ren's door open. Ren came out of the car, the way she came out of everything, at full speed, at full volume, with complete disregard for the fact that the world had not specifically arranged itself for her arrival. "Dad!" She hit him at knee level and wrapped both arms around his legs, and he bent down and picked her up in one motion, and she grabbed his face with both hands, the way she'd done since she was 2 years old, her small palms on his jaw. "Dad, Dad, guess what?" "What?" Aunt Diane's dog ate a sock. "Whose sock?" "Mine." She was thrilled about this. "My blue one. The one for Sky Days. And Aunt Diane said it would come out the other end, but I don't want it back now." "That's a fair call," Callum said. Diane came around the car with Ren's backpack over one shoulder, shaking her head. She was 43, sharp-eyed, the kind of woman who moved through the world as if she'd already anticipated everything it was going to do. She looked like Mara in the cheekbones, and the way she tilted her head when she was deciding something. Callum had learned to look at that similarity straight on years ago. The alternative was spending the rest of his life looking away from everyone who reminded him of her. "She was an absolute hurricane," Diane said, kissing Ren on the top of the head. "I mean that as a compliment." "I know you do," Ren said seriously. Diane handed Callum the backpack. They did their usual brief inventory. Everything Ren needed had come back, plus 2 extra drawings and a rock Ren had decided was important. Diane gave Callum a look over Ren's head, the look that said, "You okay?" And he gave her the small nod that said, "Yeah," and that was the whole conversation. They'd gotten efficient at it over the years. "Walk me to my car," Diane said. He set Ren down. "Go up. The code's the same. I'll be 2 minutes. Can I have juice? It's on the second shelf, the one you like." She was already through the building door. Callum walked Diane to her car. She waited until they were out of range. "Marcus texted me," she said. Callum stopped walking. "Why does Marcus have your number?" "Because I gave it to him 2 Christmases ago when you were in the bathroom, and I said if he ever thought you were doing something stupid, he should call me." She crossed her arms. "He didn't call me. He texted." "Diane. He said you left the bar with someone Friday night, and you didn't come home alone, and you won't tell anyone what happened." She studied him. "So, what happened?" "Nothing happened. I've said that." "To Marcus. You haven't said anything to me." He looked at her evenly. She looked back. She'd known him for 12 years, and she'd been looking at him exactly like this for most of them, like she could see the thing he was trying to move out of frame. "Her name is Sable," he said. "She's my neighbor. She walked me home because it was raining and I'd had too much. She stayed because it was still raining. Nothing happened. She had breakfast with me Saturday morning and brought pastry from the good bakery around the corner, and we talked." Diane was very quiet for a moment. "You talked," she said. "Yes." "About what?" He exhaled slowly. "Mara, Ren, her, things." Diane didn't say anything right away. She was doing the thing she did when something mattered, letting it settle before she responded. Mara had done the same thing. He'd always thought it was a family trait. "Is she good?" Diane said finally. "She's..." He stopped, started again. "She's real. She doesn't require anything from me. She just..." He shrugged, which was the least articulate he'd been about it. "She just talks to me." Diane looked at him for a long moment. Her expression was careful, layered. He could see about 4 things happening in it at once, and he suspected most of them were in conflict with each other. "Okay," she said. "That's it. Okay." "What do you want me to say, Callum?" "I expected more." "I have more," she said. "I'm holding it back." "You're welcome." She unlocked her car. "She's your neighbor. Apartment 4B. "That's very close." "Yes. Okay," she said again. And then, call me this week. Not about Ren. Just call me. She got in the car and looked at him through the window. And Callum, it's allowed. He stood on the sidewalk and watched her pull away. It's allowed. He turned those two words over in his head on the way back inside. He'd been told variations of it before by the grief counselor he'd seen twice, and then stopped going to by his commanding officer after his second deployment post-Mara by the chaplain who'd checked in on him 3 months after the funeral. Everyone had said some version of, "You're allowed to be okay." He'd heard it so many times it had started to sound like something people said because they didn't know what else to say. Diane had said it like she meant a specific thing. Like there was something in front of him that he'd been standing at the edge of without stepping over, and she'd seen it before he had. He was still thinking about it when the elevator opened on the 4th floor, and he nearly walked directly into Sable. She stepped back. He stepped back. They stood in the elevator doorway for half a second recalibrating. "Hi," she said. "Hi." She had her keys in her hand and a canvas bag over one shoulder. "Going out then?" He moved aside to let her into the elevator. "Ren's back," she said, glancing toward his door. 5 minutes ago. How is she? She lost a sock to a dog, and she's deeply at peace with it. He held the elevator door. "You going out?" "Grocery run." She shifted the bag on her shoulder. "You need anything? I'm going to the one on 5th. He almost said no. It was the automatic answer, "No thanks, I'm fine. I've got everything." The answer he'd been giving for 2 years to anyone who asked. "We're out of eggs," he said instead. She looked at him. Then the corner of her mouth moved. "Okay, I'll grab a dozen." He let the elevator door go. It closed between them. He stood in the hallway for a second, slightly surprised at himself, and then went back to the apartment. Ren was on the kitchen floor with the canvas pouch she used for her special rocks, reorganizing the collection by criteria only she understood. She looked up when he came in. "Dad, do you think this one is igneous or sedimentary?" He looked at the rock she was holding up. It was gray and flat and unremarkable. "Sedimentary," he said without any real basis for that opinion. "I think so too." She said it in a specific spot. "Aunt Diane said you're making friends." Callum sat down at the kitchen table. "Did she?" "She said you talked to someone at a bar. A woman, someone." Ren kept arranging rocks without looking up. "Is she nice?" "She's my neighbor. You've probably seen her in the hallway." "What does she look like?" "Dark hair, medium tall. She's—" He stopped aware he was describing Sable to his 6-year-old daughter. "She's a neighbor, Ren." "You said that already." Ren held up another rock. "Igneous or sedimentary?" "Igneous." She squinted at it. "Really?" "No, I have no idea." She accepted this with the gravity it deserved and kept going. "Is she your girlfriend?" "No." "Does she have kids?" "No." "Does she like dinosaurs?" "I don't know." Ren looked up at him finally. She had Mara's eyes, that specific shade, that specific steadiness. On Mara, that look had always made him feel known in a way that was sometimes uncomfortable and always worth it. On Ren it was still forming, still a child's version of that gaze, but the shape of it was already there. "You could ask her," Ren said with complete simplicity, "if she likes dinosaurs." "That's true," he said. "I could. If she doesn't like dinosaurs, that's okay. Some people don't." She set down another rock. "Aunt Diane doesn't like dinosaurs and she's still nice." "That's very open-minded of you." "I know," Ren said seriously. "I'm working on it." He ate lunch with Ren at the kitchen table, grilled cheese, which was the one thing he made consistently without burning it, and apple juice on her side and water on his. She talked the whole time, which was how she processed anything verbally at full speed, looping back over things she hadn't finished before adding new ones. She talked about the dog, about Diane's house, about a girl at school named Priya, who had told her that unicorns weren't real, which Ren found deeply aggressive. She said it like she was happy about it, Ren said. "Some people are like that," Callum said. "Why?" He thought about it honestly. "Sometimes when people feel bad about something they lost, they try to take it away from other people too. so they don't feel alone. Wren chewed her sandwich and considered this for a long moment. That's sad, she concluded. Yeah, he said. It is. She finished her juice, wiped her mouth with her sleeve, which he no longer corrected because it was a battle he'd officially retired from. Did you feel sad when I was at Aunt Diane's? He looked at her. Sometimes, he said. I felt sad too, she said. Not theatrically, just as a fact offered plainly the way she offered most things. But then the dog ate my sock and I felt better. I'm glad, he said. You should get a dog, she said. We've talked about this. I know. You said not until I'm older. She pushed her plate aside. How much older? Older than 6. 7. Further. Dad. Wren. She accepted this with theatrical resignation, the full performance of a child who knew she was losing this round, but was already thinking about the next. She slid off her chair. I'm going to read in my room. Okay. He started clearing plates. Door open. Door open. She agreed, already in motion. He was at the sink when the knock came. He dried his hands and went to the door, and Sable was there with a dozen eggs in a paper carton holding them out. The good kind, she said. The brown ones. You didn't have to pay me back in coffee, she said. Sometime. No rush. She started to go. She's home, he said. Sable paused. Wren, she's here. He leaned against the doorframe. She wants to know if you like dinosaurs. Sable turned back slowly. Her expression was careful. She wants to know if... She classifies people partly by their relationship to dinosaurs. I'm telling you now because if she asks you directly, there's no shame in either answer. She has stated that non-dinosaur people can still be nice. Sable stared at him. How did she know about me? Diane, my sister-in-law. She has a pipeline. I've been here for 2 days. The pipeline is fast. He held the door a little wider. You don't have to come in. She's reading. But... He stopped. He wasn't entirely sure what he was offering. He wasn't sure it needed a name. Sable looked at him for a moment. Then down at the eggs still in her hand. Then back at him. Is this a thing now? She said quietly. Not confrontational. Just precise. Coming over, talking, being neighbors who actually... She stopped. I don't know what it is, he said. Honest level. I know what it's not. And I know that 3 days ago I hadn't had an actual conversation with another person that didn't involve my kid or my job in... He stopped. Did the math without wanting to. A long time. She held his gaze. I'm not looking for something complicated, he said. Neither am I. So maybe it doesn't have to be. She stood in the hallway, the eggs in her hand, and he could see her working through it the same way he had privately over the past 2 days. The weighing of it. The awareness that something as simple as a conversation could carry weight you didn't ask it to carry. I like dinosaurs, she said finally. He felt something in his chest ease. I'll tell her, he said. He stepped back. She came in. Wren was not as she'd claimed reading in her room. She was standing in the hallway with a Stegosaurus figurine in each hand, apparently having executed a quiet reconnaissance mission at some point in the last 90 seconds. She looked at Sable. Sable looked at her. Are you the neighbor? Wren said. I am, Sable said. Wren held up one of the Stegosauruses. Do you know what this is? A Stegosaurus, Sable said without hesitation. Wren looked pleased. Most people say it wrong. They say Stegosaurus, but it's actually Stegosaurus. I didn't know that, Sable said, and she said it like she genuinely hadn't, which was the right answer. Most people don't. Wren extended the figurine toward her. You can hold it. Sable took it carefully with both hands, the way you receive something fragile and important. Wren watched her do it and nodded, apparently satisfied with the technique. Callum stood very still in the doorway to the kitchen. Something about the moment required stillness. He couldn't have explained why, only that it felt like something precarious and necessary, and the wrong move could disturb it. What's your name? Wren asked. Sable. Wren tried it. Sable. Sable. she said, gently correcting. Like the color. It means black. I know what sable means, Ren said with the specific confidence of a child who may or may not have just learned this information. I like it. She took the figurine back, looked at it, looked at Sable. Do you want to see my rocks? Very much, Sable said. And just like that, Ren turned and led her down the hallway toward her room, as if this had all been arranged in advance, as if there had never been any question about it. Callum did not follow. He went back to the kitchen and finished the dishes. He could hear them through the wall, or not quite hear, just catch the texture of it. Ren's voice, fast and committed. The occasional response from Sable, lower, warmer than her usual register. Ren did not tolerate passive audiences. She required engagement, and she could smell insincerity at 40 paces. If Sable was performing, Ren would surface it within 5 minutes. 10 minutes passed, then 15. The voices continued. Callum put the dishes away, fixed himself a glass of water, sat at the kitchen table with his phone face down in front of him, and did not look at it. At the 20-minute mark, Ren appeared in the kitchen doorway. Dad, she said. Yeah. Sable says she used to sail on the ocean. The Chesapeake Bay, Callum said. Ren's eyes went wide. You knew. She told me. Ren turned this over. Did she tell you about the boat with the character? She did. That means you've had real conversations, Ren said with the gravity of someone issuing a formal assessment, not just hallway ones. Yes. She looked at him for a moment longer. Then, I like her. He kept his face neutral. Good. She said I can show her my shell collection too, but that's a different visit. She turned to go, stopped. Dad, yeah. Can she stay for dinner? He thought about it for exactly 1 second. Go ask her. Ren disappeared back down the hallway. A muffled exchange. Then Ren's voice, louder, triumphant. She says yes. He got up and opened the freezer. A few minutes later, Sable appeared in the kitchen doorway. She had what appeared to be a small piece of quartz in her hand, which Ren had clearly gifted her. She looked at it, then at him. I've been given a mineral, she said. That's significant, he told her. Don't lose it. I gathered. She set it carefully on the edge of the counter. She's extraordinary. I know. She told me 3 facts about Triceratops in under a minute. That's actually slow for her. She must like you. She shook her head, something shifting in her expression, something soft and complicated that she didn't try to hide. What are we making? He'd found chicken in the freezer. Nothing fancy. Can I help? He moved over, made room. She came in beside him at the counter without ceremony, the way she'd done everything without making it bigger than it was, without requiring it to be announced or defined or justified. They made dinner. Ren set the table with the focused effort of a child who took table setting seriously and had her own precise system for where everything went. Sable chopped onions without complaining, even when her eyes started to water. Callum burned the rice slightly, which was rare enough that Sable noticed and didn't say anything, which he appreciated. They ate together, the 3 of them, at the small table that was slightly too small for 3 people, Ren between them, because that was where she placed herself, talking at full speed about the geological differences between quartz and feldspar, as if this was a completely normal dinner that had been happening for months. Later, after Ren had been bathed and read to and put to bed, a process that took 45 minutes and involved 2 books, 1 song, a brief negotiation over the status of the sock-eating dog, and a final check on the rock collection to make sure nothing had moved. Callum came back to the kitchen to find Sable washing the remaining dishes. He stood in the doorway. She turned, realized he was there. She's down. Asking to stay up another 10 minutes was the last move. We compromised on 5. She'll be asleep in 3. He leaned against the frame. You don't have to do those. I'm almost done. He came in and stood beside her, picking up the dish towel. They worked quietly, efficiently, without bumping into each other. There wasn't much space, but they'd both been in enough small spaces to know how to move around another person. When it was done, she dried her hands, leaned back against the counter. They stood side by side in his kitchen, The apartment quiet now, in the way it only got after Wren was asleep, a different quiet than the daytime one, fuller, like the rooms were finally exhaling. "She's going to remember this," Sable said, not making a point of it, just observing. "She remembers everything," Callum said. "I'm convinced she has total recall. She can tell you what I was wearing the first day of school. Not her first day, my first day of drop-off. She was 3. "She watches you," Sable said. "The way she looks at you, she's taking notes." He looked at the counter. "I know. It keeps me honest." Sable nodded slowly. A long beat of quiet passed between them. "Thank you," she said. "For what?" "For dinner. For—" She stopped. "For not making it weird." "It could have been weird," he said. "It could have been very weird," she agreed. He looked at her. She was looking at the far wall, and he could see something working itself out in her profile, some quiet negotiation happening behind her eyes. "Sable." She looked at him. "This thing," he said, "whatever it is, I'm not in a hurry. I don't need it to be anything in particular." She held his gaze. "Neither do I. But I also don't think it's nothing." She was quiet for a moment. Long enough that he started to wonder if he'd said the wrong thing. Then she said, "No, it's not nothing." He nodded. She gathered her keys from the counter, picked up the piece of quartz Wren had given her, held it for a second in her palm. Put it in her pocket. He walked her to the door. She stepped into the hallway and turned back. Once. Not the way she had that first morning. Not that closed, considered look. This was different. This was open. Just slightly. Just enough. "Good night, Callum." "Good night." He watched her go. He waited until 4B closed behind her. Then he stood in the quiet hallway a moment longer, listening. No music this time. Just the building settling around him and his daughter asleep down the hall, and 30 feet between his door and hers, and the strange, specific feeling of someone who had been very cold for a very long time, noticing with something like wonder that the temperature had changed. He went to check on Wren. She was asleep exactly where he'd left her, one arm out of the covers, the Stegosaurus figurine in her hand, the same one she'd given Sable to hold. She'd taken it back at the end of the visit, which was correct, but she was holding it now, like she was keeping it safe for someone. He pulled the cover up over her shoulder, stood there a minute in the dark. She used to sail, Wren had said at dinner, unprompted, fork in hand, completely matter-of-fact. On the Chesapeake. She said the water was really big and her grandpa showed her how. She said she misses it. And Callum had looked across the table at Sable, and Sable had looked back at him, and neither of them said anything, and Wren had gone on eating her chicken, without realizing she'd just handed them both something. He turned off Wren's light and went to bed. He lay in the dark, and for the first time in as long as he could remember, the bed didn't feel like an expanse he was trying to cross. It just felt like where he was. The week that followed didn't announce itself as anything significant. That was the thing about the weeks that changed you, they rarely did. Monday was school drop-off, and a briefing that ran 2 hours over schedule, and Marcus asking Callum approximately 4 times if he was sure nothing happened, and Callum saying yes 4 times with decreasing patience. Tuesday was Wren's parent-teacher conference, which Callum attended in his civilian clothes, with his hands folded on the table, like a man determined to be perceived as non-threatening, and which resulted in the information that Wren was reading 2 grade levels above her class, and had recently organized the classroom's rock collection by mineral composition, without being asked, which her teacher found both impressive and slightly unsettling. Wednesday was a training run that went long, and a dinner that went short, and a conversation through the wall. Not a real one, just the texture of Sable's television, and at some point her on-the-phone voice low and even laughing once at something he couldn't hear. He noticed the laugh. That was new. Before this week he hadn't known what her laugh sounded like through a wall. Now he did. Thursday was when things shifted. He was coming up the stairs. Elevator was out again, 3rd time this month. A fact he intended to raise formally with building management and had been intending to raise for 6 weeks when he heard it. Sable's door and voices. 2 of them. One was hers. The other was a man's, and it had the specific register of someone who was working to stay calm and not quite succeeding. Callum did not slow down. He kept his pace, even kept his eyes forward. Moved through the hallway with the deliberate neutrality of a man who was absolutely not listening. He heard, "Didn't say that you're putting words." And then, "Lower Sable. I know exactly what you said, Daniel." He was at his door. He got his key in the lock, got inside, closed the door behind him with the careful quiet of someone who understood the value of not making things harder for other people. He stood in his entryway for a moment. Then he went and picked up Ren from Diane's because it was his pickup day, and he drove with the radio on, and his mind doing the thing it did when he was deliberately not thinking about something, which was, think about it constantly from a slight angle. Daniel. The name had the specific weight of a history. 8 months, Sable had said. The anniversary. He hadn't asked more than that, and she hadn't offered more than that, and he'd left it there because it was hers to keep. But Daniel apparently had not left it there. Ren talked the whole drive home about a new development in the Priya situation. Apparently, Priya had reversed her position on unicorns partially under specific conditions, and Callum listened and responded in the right places, and was grateful for the noise. He didn't see Sable that evening. He didn't see her Friday morning either, though he listened for the sounds that told him she was home, the coffee maker, her specific walking pattern. The morning news she kept low and heard them. Which settled something he hadn't fully acknowledged was unsettled. Friday evening, Ren was at a classmate's birthday party from 4 to 7, and Callum had the apartment to himself and the specific restlessness that came with it. He did pull-ups in the doorframe. He read 4 pages of the same article 3 times without retaining it. He stood in the kitchen and looked at the refrigerator and thought about the eggs Sable had brought the carton still half full on the second shelf. At 5:40, he knocked on 4B. She answered after a moment. She was in a gray sweatshirt, and her hair was up in the unself-conscious way that meant she hadn't been planning for company, and she looked at him the way she always looked at him, direct, unperformed, taking him as he was. "Hey," he said. "Hey. I heard something last night," he said. "In the hall. I wasn't trying to." She looked at him for a beat. "I know. You don't have to tell me anything. I know that too." She stepped back from the door, an implicit invitation, and he came in. Her apartment was the mirror of his same layout, 4B to his 4C. But it was different in the way that any two spaces are different when different people live in them. There was more color. Books everywhere, not decorative. The kind that were actually read, the spines bent and creased. A large print above the couch that wasn't quite abstract, but wasn't quite figurative either, something oceanic about it. She sat on the couch and pulled her feet up, and he sat in the chair across from her, and for a minute, neither of them said anything. "He texted me 2 weeks ago," she said finally. "For the first time since it ended. He said he'd been thinking about things. He wanted to talk." She looked at the far wall. "I said no, and then I apparently failed to mean it because I agreed to let him come by. And he came by." She exhaled through her nose. "And he said all the things that I knew he was going to say, the things that sound like apologies, but are structured as explanations. The kind of talking that's really just building a case." Callum was quiet. He knew that kind of talking. He'd been on the receiving end of it from commanding officers, from institutional structures, from people who needed to believe they were being reasonable while they were doing unreasonable things. "What did you say?" he asked. "I said no," she said. Again. More clearly this time. A pause. "He left. Eventually." "How long is eventually?" She looked at him. Something moved in her expression. 40 minutes. He kept his voice level. "He was in your apartment for 40 minutes after you told him no. It wasn't like that. He wasn't threatening. He was just..." She stopped. "He was the kind of man who believes that if he stays long enough and says enough things, the answer changes. And in the past, it sometimes did." She wrapped her arms around herself. "I let it sometimes. I'm not..." She stopped again. "I'm trying to be honest about my part in it." "You can be honest about your part without excusing his," Callum said. She looked at him. "Those are 2 different things," he said. "You can own what you own without taking on what's his." She was quiet for a long moment. Outside, a car passed. The building made its usual sounds. "He said something before he left," she said. He said that the reason I was keeping him away was because I'd replaced what we had with something smaller. Something that didn't require anything of me. She turned the hem of her sweatshirt in her hands. He didn't say your name. He doesn't know your name. But he meant... She gestured vaguely. He meant whatever this is. Callum didn't move. What did you say? I said that what I had now wasn't smaller. I said it was different. Her jaw tightened. He said different means less. That's wrong, Callum said. I know. Not just as an argument, as a fact. That's just wrong. I know, she said again. And then softer. But it's easier to know that when someone says it clearly. He leaned forward, his elbows on his knees. Sable, you told him no twice, in your own space. He stayed 40 minutes. He kept his voice measured because measured was what the moment needed, not heat. That's not someone who heard you. She looked at him with something that was tired and clear at the same time. I know. Does he know where you live? He was just here, Callum. I mean, does he plan to come back? She pulled her knees to her chest. He said he would give me time. That's not an answer. No, she admitted. It's not. He sat back, ran a hand along his jaw. He was working through something, not anger, or not only anger, something more structural. The specific way a threat assessment worked, except in this case, the threat was soft-edged and complicated, and tangled up in someone else's history. If he comes back, he said, I want you to knock. She looked at him. On the wall, he said. Or the door, or call me. Whatever's easiest. He held her gaze. I'm not going to do anything. I just want to be available. She studied him for a long moment. You're not my bodyguard. I'm aware. I'm your neighbor. He said it the way she had that first morning when she'd used the word to explain why his history with her wasn't quite that of a stranger. I'm not really a stranger. I've lived 30 feet from you for a year and a half. He was using her own logic back at her. 30 feet. She almost smiled. It didn't fully form, but the shape of it was there. You remember everything I say. I pay attention, he said. When things matter. The room was quiet. She unwrapped herself from the couch, sat with her feet on the floor, her hands in her lap. The particular posture of someone who'd been carrying something alone and had just set part of it down. He's not dangerous, she said. I want to be clear about that. He's just the kind of man who makes you feel like your no isn't final, Callum said. That's its own kind of thing. She looked at her hands. Yes. And it's exhausting. Yes. He stood up. She looked up at him, startled slightly by the movement. Come on, he said. What? Ren's at a party until 7. I've got an hour and a half and I'm useless in my apartment right now. He looked at her. Walk with me, around the block. Get out of these walls for a minute. She looked at him, then at the door, then back at him. Something in her expression resolved itself. Let me get shoes, she said. They walked 2 blocks before either of them said anything that was more than incidental. Lights changing cut, left, there's a pothole there. The evening was cool without being cold, the kind of midweek city quiet that happened when the weekend crowds were gone and the next set of days hadn't arrived yet. They walked at the same pace without negotiating it. Tell me something that's not about him, she said. He thought about it. Marcus asked me today if I was seeing someone. I said no. He said, are you sure? Like I might have missed it. She did smile at that reel this time, looking at the sidewalk. What did you tell him? I said I was sure about my own life, yes. He glanced at her. He's going to ask again. Will you give him a different answer? I'll give him an accurate one. He paused. Which will be the same one? Because it's accurate. Because it's accurate, he agreed. She glanced up at him sideways. You're very precise. It's a professional hazard. What happens when the precise answer and the honest answer aren't the same thing? He considered that seriously. Then I wait until they are. She was quiet for half a block. Then, that's either very admirable or very frustrating to be around. Diane says it's both depending on the day. Smart woman. The smartest person I know, he said. which is saying something because Ren is 6 and operating at a level that concerns me." That got a real laugh, the sudden full one he'd first heard at his kitchen table on Saturday morning. He liked knowing he could get there reliably now. Liked knowing what it took. They turned the corner. A street vendor was packing up for the night. A couple was having a quiet argument outside a restaurant that looked like it had been going for a while. A kid was sitting on steps playing something on his phone, feet tapping along to whatever was in his headphones. "I keep thinking about what you said," Sable said. "About the quiet getting loud." "When?" "Saturday. When I came back with the pastries. I said I went back to my apartment, and it felt different. You said the quiet gets loud when you've been somewhere where it wasn't." "I remember. I've been thinking about that all week." She walked with her hands in her pockets, her pace steady. "Because I've been alone for 8 months, and I thought I'd gotten used to the quiet. I thought I'd made peace with it. And then—" She stopped. Started again. "And now I go back to my apartment, and I can hear the quiet more than I could before. Which seems like the opposite of progress." "It's not," he said. "How is it not? Before the quiet was all there was. You were used to it because you didn't have anything to compare it to." He looked at the street ahead. "Now you do. That's not going backward. That's just—" He searched for it. "It's just knowing the difference." She walked beside him, and he could feel her thinking. The particular texture of her silence when she was working something through was specific, denser than her comfortable silences, more directed. "Does it get easier?" she said. "Knowing the difference. When the comparison is when the other side of it isn't—" She stopped. "You've been doing this longer than me, the alone part." He was quiet for a moment. "It doesn't get easier," he said. "It gets more navigable. Those aren't the same thing, but the second one matters." She exhaled. "Okay. The second one is actually enough," he said. "Most days." She looked at him. They'd slowed without realizing it, stopped at the corner without consciously deciding to. The evening moved around them. "Most days," she said. "Most days," he confirmed. "Some days it's not. Some days it's just hard, and there's no more complicated explanation than that." He looked at her. "Those days I try to get through the day and put Ren to bed and go to sleep and let the next day be different." "Does that work?" "It works about 60% of the time. What do you do the other 40? 40% I call Diane at 11 p.m., and she picks up every time, which I am aware is a considerable thing that I should probably express more gratitude for." He paused. "And once I punched a wall in a TGI Fridays parking lot." She laughed again, shaking her head. "You've mentioned that. It bears repeating. It was instructive." "In what way?" "In the way that walls don't feel anything, and your hand does, which is a metaphor I should have understood before I needed to demonstrate it physically." He looked at her. "The point is you find what works. It's not elegant, but you find it." She looked at him for a long moment. The streetlight caught her face at an angle that was honest, unedited. She wasn't performing anything. She was just standing there next to him, being exactly as she was. "You help," she said, simply, without making it larger than it was. He held her gaze. "You too." They stood on the corner for a moment longer. Then Callum's phone buzzed. Diane, the pickup reminder, the party running 5 minutes behind schedule, Ren apparently engaged in a critical final round of musical chairs. "I have to go get her," he said. "Go," Sable said. He didn't move immediately. "You good?" "I'm navigable," she said. The word landed precisely the way she'd intended it, and she gave him a small, clear look that told him she'd meant it. He almost smiled. "Good." He walked back toward the apartment, and at the corner, he glanced back briefly without making it a thing. She was still standing there, hands in her pockets, watching him go. When she saw him look back, she didn't look away. He went to pick up his daughter. Ren had won musical chairs. She announced this from a distance as he approached the building entrance before he'd gotten within 10 feet of her, as if the news was too significant to wait for normal conversational proximity. "I won," she said. "I heard." From outside, "You projected." She accepted this as a compliment. She had a party bag in one hand and a sugar high that would peak in approximately 45 minutes and then drop off a cliff, a cycle he'd learned to manage with the precision of a field operation. He had exactly one window to get her bathed, settled, and as close to calm as Wren ever got before the crash came. In the elevator, working again briefly, she said, "Did you see Sable today?" "This evening. Yes." "Did she bring more pastry?" "No, we walked." Wren considered this. "Like a walk, or like an exercise walk?" "What's the difference?" "An exercise walk is when you don't talk. A walk is when you do." Walk, he said. "Good." She shifted her party bag. "She was sad this week. I could hear it." Callum looked at her. "What do you mean you could hear it?" "Through the wall," Wren said with complete matter-of-factness. "On Wednesday night, she was talking to someone and she sounded sad. Not crying sad. Just—" Wren searched for the word with the focused effort she always applied to things that mattered to her. "Tired sad." "Tired sad," he repeated. "That's the worst kind," Wren said. "Crying sad goes away. Tired sad stays longer." The elevator opened on the 4th floor. They walked down the hallway. Wren's sneakers squeaking on the floor. At his door, Wren stopped, looked at 4B. "Is she okay now?" she said. "I think so. She's getting there." Wren nodded slowly. Then, with the lateral logic that was exclusively hers, "I'm going to put a drawing under her door. Tonight. Tomorrow. I need to make it first." She turned to him with the Stegosaurus-level seriousness. "What's her favorite color?" "I don't know. Dad." "I haven't asked her every question yet, Wren. We've known each other for less than a week. You've known her a year and a half. We talked for less than a week." She processed this with visible patience. "Find out," she said. "I need to know before I do the drawing." He opened the apartment door. "I'll look into it." She walked inside and immediately began the very serious business of emptying her party bag contents onto the floor to conduct an audit, which was how the next 30 minutes disappeared. After the bath, after the 2 books and the 1 song, after Wren had made him check the rock collection twice and verify that the Stegosaurus was in its correct position, he sat on the edge of her bed in the dark. "Dad," she said. Her voice was already going slow at the edges, the crash arriving on schedule. "Yeah." "Is Sable going to keep coming over?" He was quiet for a second. "Would you like her to—" "Yes," Wren said immediately, like the answer had been ready for days. "She holds rocks correctly." "That's an important quality." "The most important." Her voice got slower. "And she listens. When I talk about dinosaurs, she actually listens. Not the listening where you say, but you're thinking about something else." "I do that sometimes," he admitted. "I know," she said. "But you also do the real listening. And she does the real listening." A pause long enough that he thought she was asleep. Then, "You both do it at the same time, when you're talking to each other." He sat in the dark. "Yeah. Yeah." Her words were soft and blurring now. "I think that's why you're friends." "Go to sleep, Wren." "I'm almost asleep." She was asleep in under a minute. He sat there a moment longer, her small breathing filling the room, her hand loose on the pillow beside her. "I think that's why you're friends. 6 years old, total recall, full-spectrum emotional intelligence." He was simultaneously proud of her and slightly alarmed at her. He went back to the kitchen and stood at the counter and did not pick up his phone. He thought about the walk. About the way Sable had said you help plainly without decoration, the same way she said everything that she actually meant. He thought about "I'm navigable," about the word landing exactly right because he'd offered it and she'd taken it and used it back. He thought about Daniel 40 minutes in her apartment building a case with his words and Sable holding her no until it stuck. He thought about Wren's assessment. You both do it at the same time. The real listening. He knocked on the wall. 3 knocks, measured, not urgent, just present. A pause. Then, through the wall, 3 knocks back. He didn't knock again. She didn't either. It was enough. It was, He was coming to understand exactly enough this specific unnamed thing that asked nothing of either of them except honesty and offered nothing false in return. He turned off the kitchen light and went to bed. He didn't lie awake long. The apartment felt the right size. The quiet stayed where it belonged, and 30 feet away, he was fairly certain hers did too. The drawing appeared under Sable's door on Saturday morning. Callum didn't see it happen. Wren had woken up before him, which was not unusual, and had apparently completed her mission in the hallway at 6:53 a.m. in her pajamas and dinosaur slippers, before he'd even gotten the coffee started. He only knew because he heard the soft pad of her feet and the whisper of paper on floor, and then the return of her feet, quick and satisfied, like someone who had executed a plan and was pleased with the results. When he came out of his room, she was sitting at the kitchen table with a bowl of cereal she'd poured herself, also not unusual, she'd been doing that since she was 5. The independence non-negotiable, and she looked at him with the specific expression of someone who has done something and is waiting for the acknowledgement without asking for it. "You drew the picture," he said, "last night, after you thought I was asleep." She said it without guilt, purely informational. "I used the purple and the green because those are growing colors, and I didn't know her favorite color, so I used the ones that felt right." "What did you draw?" "A sailboat." She ate her cereal. "On the Chesapeake, with her grandpa. I made him have a hat because grandfathers have hats." Callum stood in the kitchen doorway and looked at his daughter. She was 6 years old and had drawn a woman's grief and love and memory onto a piece of paper in purple and green and slid it under a door before 7 in the morning and was now eating cereal like it was simply the next right thing to do, which he thought it was. "That was thoughtful," he said. She considered his word choice. "It was just true," she said. "She misses him. You said she doesn't sail anymore because it was theirs. So I drew it for her, so she could have it a different way." She tapped her spoon on the edge of the bowl. "You can't take away something real, but you can make a new real." He stood there a moment longer than he needed to. "You can make a new real," he repeated. "Obviously," she said, and went back to her cereal. He poured his coffee and sat across from her at the small table and thought about all the things he had understood intellectually for years that his 6-year-old had just stated as common sense. At 8:15, there was a knock at the door. He opened it, and Sable was standing in the hallway, with the drawing in her hands, and her eyes were bright in a way that had nothing to do with crying and everything to do with the specific luminosity that came from being genuinely seen by something unexpected. She was holding the paper carefully, both hands, the way Wren had held the Stegosaurus out to her. "She drew my grandfather's hat," Sable said. "She gave him a hat. She said grandfathers have hats." Sable laughed the sudden real kind and pressed her lips together after, like she was keeping the rest of it in. She looked down at the drawing, then up at him. "Can I thank her?" He stepped aside. Wren was still at the kitchen table, a second bowl of cereal in front of her. Now he'd have to set a limit on that, but not this morning. And she looked up when Sable came in and waited with the patience of someone who knew what was coming. "I love it," Sable said. She knelt down to Wren's level without hesitating, without making it a production. Just got down to where the conversation actually was. "The hat is exactly right." "I thought so," Wren said. "What color was his hair?" "Gray. Silver, really. He went completely silver when he was in his 40s. She looked at the drawing. "You gave him silver in the picture." "I didn't know," Wren said. "I just used the color that felt like a grandfather." "It's exactly right," Sable said again, softer this time. "Can I keep this? I made it for you," Wren said with the specific patience of someone clarifying the obvious. "So yes," Sable smiled. She stood back up and looked at Callum over Wren's head, and whatever was in her expression, he couldn't name precisely, but he didn't need to. He recognized it. He'd felt it shape in himself this past week every time something happened that he hadn't planned for and was glad of anyway. He poured her a cup of coffee. She sat down. He sat down. Wren moved her cereal bowl to make room and started explaining to Sable the geological significance of a particular piece of rose quartz she'd brought to the table, and the morning assembled itself around them like it knew where to go. The Saturday after that was the first time Daniel came back. Callum was in the hallway with Wren's backpack when he saw a man he didn't recognize standing outside 4B's door, mid-40s, well-dressed in that slightly too deliberate way, the posture of someone who'd rehearsed what he was about to say and was maintaining it against the possibility of forgetting. Callum did not slow down. He took Wren's hand and kept walking toward the elevator, but the man knocked on the door, and a moment later, Sable's voice came through it. Careful, controlled, and the man said something Callum didn't catch, and Sable's voice shifted into the register he'd heard once before that Thursday evening 2 weeks ago, the one that was trying to stay level because staying level was the only leverage she had. He put Wren in the elevator. He pressed the lobby button. He crouched down to her level. "I need you to go downstairs and wait with Mr. Hennessy at the front desk," he said. Mr. Hennessy was the building's weekend door attendant, a 70-year-old retired transit worker who kept hard candies in his pocket and called Wren Little Miss, and whom Wren had decided was her ally. "Tell him I'll be down in 5 minutes." Wren looked at him. She looked at the hallway behind him. She was 6, not oblivious. "Is Sable okay?" she said. "She will be," he said. 5 minutes. Mr. Hennessy. The elevator closed. Callum walked back down the hallway. He didn't do anything dramatic. He didn't announce himself or insert himself between them or make it a confrontation. He walked to his own door right beside hers, and he took out his keys and unlocked it deliberately, audibly, and stood in his own doorway. The man Daniel turned and looked at him. Callum looked back. Not a threat, not a performance, just a steady, clear, unambiguous presence. The kind he'd learned in 11 years of situations where the difference between escalation and resolution often came down to whether someone in the room was willing to hold a line without blinking. He wasn't angry. He was certain. There was a difference, and he knew it. Daniel looked at him for a moment. Then he looked at Sable. Then he did the calculation that people like Daniel always eventually did when the variables stopped adding up in their favor, and he said something quiet to Sable that Callum couldn't hear, and Sable said nothing back, and Daniel walked toward the elevator. He passed Callum without a word. Callum watched him go. The elevator opened, closed. The hallway was quiet. Sable was still standing in her doorway. She looked at Callum with an expression that had several things in it at once, relief and exhaustion, and something that was almost irritation, not at him, just at the fact of it, the whole weight of it. "You didn't have to do that," she said. "I know. I was handling it. I know that too." He held her gaze. "You did handle it. I was just 30 feet away." She looked at him for a long moment. Then she exhaled, and some of the held-in tension left her shoulders. "He's not going to come back," she said. "He knows it's done now. He needed to see that it was done." "He needed to see that you weren't alone," Callum said. She didn't answer right away, but she didn't look away either. "Yeah," she said quietly. "That too." He went downstairs and collected Wren, who had consumed 2 of Mr. Hennessy's hard candies and was mid-story about the geological formation of limestone when Callum arrived. Mr. Hennessy looked relieved to be rescued. In the elevator on the way back up, Wren said, "Is it done?" "Yes," he said. "Good," she said with finality, and didn't ask anything else, because she understood in the way she seemed to understand most things when a subject had reached its natural end. 2 weeks later on a Sunday, when the weather made the kind of argument that was difficult to refuse, clear and cool and honest about what it was, Callum drove Sable to the Chesapeake. It hadn't been planned exactly. It had happened the way most things between them happened, which was gradually and then suddenly, without formal announcement. He'd been drinking coffee at his kitchen table on Saturday morning when she'd mentioned offhand that she sometimes looked up boat charters and then closed the tab. He'd asked why she closed it. She'd said she wasn't sure. He'd said they could just go look. Not sail, just go. She'd said that was a strange distinction. He'd said it was a start. They left at 7. Wren was at Diane's for the weekend. The drive was 2 hours, and they filled it without effort, the conversation moving the way it had learned to move between them, without agenda, without performance, following whatever thread was available, and not worrying about where it ended up. She told him more about her grandfather. He told her about the first time he'd been on a Navy vessel, and how the scale of it had made him feel briefly and unexpectedly like a very small thing in a very large world. which was one of the few feelings he'd never told anyone about, because it didn't fit the story people expected from someone who'd chosen that life. "It didn't scare you," she said. "No, it was clarifying, the size of the water, the way it didn't care about any of the things I'd decided were important." He kept his eyes on the road. "It made me feel like I could start over. Every time I went out. Like the water reset something." She was quiet for a moment. "That's exactly how it felt," she said. "With my grandfather. I didn't have words for it at 17, but that's what it was." "You have the words now," he said. "I do now," she agreed. They parked and walked to the marina. The boats were in their slips, the bay beyond them open and gray-blue and enormous the way it always was. She stopped at the edge of the dock and stood there without speaking, and he stood beside her and let her have it, the looking, the whatever it was that happened when you came back to something you'd left behind. After a while she said, "He would have liked you. Your grandfather. He had a thing about men who knew how to be quiet," she said. "He said most men talked to fill space, and a few talked to connect, and the really rare ones knew when talking wasn't the point." Callum looked at the water. "I talk plenty." "You talk when it matters," she said. "That's different." He looked at her. She was still looking at the water, her hair moving in the cold air off the bay, and she had the expression of someone standing in two times at once the past she was honoring and the present she was choosing. "I haven't been here since he died," she said. 14 years. "How does it feel?" She thought about it honestly, the way she did everything. "Like I was afraid it would take something from me," she said. "Coming back, like the missing would get heavier." She paused. "But it doesn't. It's just..." She searched for it. "It's just water, and it's still mine." He didn't say anything. He stood there beside her in the cold, and let the water be what it was, and let her have what she needed from it. After a long while she said, "Thank you for bringing me here. You've thanked me a lot," he said, "for regular things." "They're not regular things," she said. "You just make them feel that way." He looked at her. She was looking at him now, not the water, and the expression was the same one she'd had the morning she'd stood in his kitchen and said, "It's not nothing." Clear and direct and honest, and not asking him to do anything with it except receive it. "Sable," he said. "Yeah. I need to say something." She waited. "I've been very careful," he said, "this past month, about what this is. I didn't want to name it wrong or rush it or..." He stopped. Started again. "I've been telling myself I didn't know what it was. And that was true for a while. But I know what it is now." She was very still. "I don't want to make this something it's not," he said. "I'm not going to tell you I'm in love with you. That's not where we are, and I won't say something just because the moment has that kind of air to it." He looked at her steadily. "But I want to be honest about what I know. Which is that I think about you when you're not there. Which is that the last month has been different than the 2 years before it, in a way that matters to me. Which is that Wren drew your grandfather's boat from a story she heard once because she understood something about you that I'm still learning." He paused. "I'm not in a hurry. I'm not asking for anything that isn't already here. But I wanted to say that clearly." So it said. The bay moved below them. A gull called somewhere off to the left. Sable looked at him for a long moment. Her jaw was set not in tension, but in the way that meant she was deciding to be as honest as he'd been. "Daniel told me I was settling," she said. "When I told him it was done. He said I was retreating, that I'd found something smaller because I was afraid of something real." She held Callum's gaze. "I've been thinking about that. Not because I believe him, but because I wanted to make sure I understood why I didn't." "And because this doesn't feel smaller," she said. "It feels truer, and those things aren't the same." She looked at the water briefly, then back at him. "I think about you when you're not there too. I think about Wren. I think about the three of us at that too small table, and the dinosaur sheets in the dryer, and the rock collection, and the..." She stopped, and something in her voice had gone careful. "I think about what it would be like if this was just what my life looked like, and I don't feel afraid of that. I feel..." She searched for the word. "Steady," she said. I feel steady. He let that land. Let it be exactly what it was. Steady's good, he said. Steady's really good, she agreed. He reached over and took her hand. Not dramatically, not with ceremony. Just picked it up the way you pick up something that belongs close to you, and held it, and she let him, and they stood there at the edge of the Chesapeake Bay in the October cold, and watched the water do what water did, which was move and return and keep going. The drive home was easy. They stopped for food at a diner off the highway and ate in a booth by the window and talked about nothing significant. Her preference for window seats, his irrational distrust of booths against walls. The time Wren had reviewed a restaurant on a piece of paper and given it 2 stars because the chair was wobbly. The fact that Sable had grown up in Maryland and had never once been to the Smithsonian until she was 29. 29, he said. I kept meaning to go, she said. And then one day I just went by myself on a Tuesday and spent 4 hours in the Natural History Museum. Wren would like you even more if she knew that. She already likes me a concerning amount. She gave you a piece of rose quartz, he said. She's only given 3 other people pieces of her collection. Me, Diane, and her teacher, Mrs. Kowalski, and that was after a full semester of relationship building. I've known her 2 weeks. She's a good judge of character. Sable looked at him across the diner table and shook her head, but she was smiling the real one both sides all the way up. She gets that from someone, she said. He held her gaze. She gets it from her mother. It landed the way it was meant to, not as a door closing, not as a wall going up, just as the truth. Mara was part of this story. Would always be part of this story. He wasn't going to shape the narrative around her absence, or pretend the weight of her wasn't real. He was just going to carry it the way he'd learned to carry it openly without apology, as something that had made him who he was. Sable held his gaze and didn't flinch from the name. Didn't pivot away or offer condolence. Just received it the way she received everything he gave her fully and without performance. Tell me something about her I don't know, she said. He thought about it. She kept a list, he said, of things she wanted to do. Not a bucket list, she hated that term. She called it a while I'm here list. Things she wanted to see while she was here. Small things mostly. A specific canyon in Utah. A particular jazz club in New Orleans she'd read about in a novel. The Northern Lights. He looked at the window. She didn't get all of them. Which ones did she get? The jazz club. New Orleans the year before she died. I took Wren, she was 2, she slept through the whole set. He half smiled. Mara said that was fine. She said Wren was taking it in through osmosis. Was she? Wren asked me last month if we could listen to jazz in the car. He shook his head. I don't know how to explain that. Sable was quiet for a moment. What's still on the list? He looked at her. The Northern Lights, he said, and the canyon. She held his gaze carefully. You could take Wren. Yeah, he said. I've been thinking about it. A beat passed between them. He watched her decide whether to say the next thing, saw her land on honesty the way she always did. I'd like to see the Northern Lights too, she said. Someday. No agenda. Just I've never seen them. That's something to work toward, he said. Yeah, she said. It is. They drove the rest of the way home, with the radio on low here in the passenger seat with her feet tucked under her, which was apparently how she sat when she was comfortable, a fact he now knew. He knew the way she held her coffee cup. He knew the laugh that came from surprise versus the laugh that came from real amusement. He knew she slept on the left side of any bed and couldn't read for more than 20 minutes without checking her phone, and felt guilty about it every time. He knew she was more afraid of disappointing people she cared about than she was of anything else, and that this fear had made her stay in things longer than she should have, and that she was working on that. He knew she held rocks correctly. He knew she listened with her whole body. He knew she made room for grief without trying to fix it. He knew she was the kind of person who, when she was sad, played old music low enough that it didn't bother the neighbors, but loud enough that it reached through the wall. He'd been listening to that music for a month and had never told her. She'd never told him she knew he was listening. They'd been doing that, the specific companionship of 2 people who were present to each other without demanding anything for longer than either of them had named it. He pulled into the parking garage, turned off the engine. They sat for a moment in the quiet. "Good day," she said. "Yeah," he said. "Really good." They rode the elevator up to the 4th floor. In the hallway outside their doors, his and hers, 30 feet of carpet between them and 4 inches of shared wall, she turned to face him. He looked at her. "Come over for dinner tomorrow," he said. "Wren's back in the afternoon. She'll want to show you the new rock she found at Diane's." He paused. "And she'll want to know if you liked the Chesapeake." "What will you tell her about today?" "I'll tell her we went to the water and it was good." He met her eyes. "And that you're coming to dinner." She nodded, slowly and then with certainty. "I'll be there." He stood at his door and she stood at hers, and the hallway held the kind of quiet it had finally learned to hold the right size, full, rather than empty the specific warmth of 2 lives that had found their way to the same corridor without planning it and had stopped finally and recognized each other. She went inside. He went inside. And across 30 feet and 4 inches of shared wall, 2 people who had each believed for a long time that the life they had was the only one available to them, sat down in their own kitchens, in their own quiet, and understood with the particular clarity that only comes after you've stopped running from something that the future was not what they'd been told it had to be. It was something they were making. Slowly, carefully, one honest moment at a time. And for the first time in longer than either of them could exactly calculate, that was not a frightening thing. It was the only thing that made sense. And that in the end was enough, more than enough, to begin.